The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as my daughter Patricia signed the final papers, her manicured nails clicking against the clipboard with practiced efficiency. Beside her, my son David shifted uncomfortably in his designer suit, checking his Rolex for the third time in 5 minutes. Neither would meet my eyes. The monthly fees are automatically deducted from her account, Patricia explained to the nursing home administrator, her voice carrying that professional tone she used. With difficult clients at her law firm, we've arranged for basic cable and the standard meal plan, nothing fancy. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra. Special for you. Nothing fancy. I sat in the wheelchair they'd insisted I needed, my hands folded in my lap, listening to them discuss my life as if I weren't there. At 78, after raising 2 children as a single mother, working 3 jobs to put them through college, and sacrificing everything for their success, this was my reward. Sunset Manor, a mid-tier facility that smelled of disinfectant and broken dreams. "Mom, you'll love it here," David said, finally looking at me with those cold blue eyes that had once sparkled with childhood mischief. The activities coordinator mentioned they have bingo twice a week. Bingo. The woman who had built a small real estate empire from nothing, who had negotiated million-dollar deals while they were in diapers, was being placated with bingo. "And we'll visit," Patricia added, though her tone suggested otherwise. "Once we get settled into the new routine, you understand how busy things are with the merger." The merger. Her law firm was acquiring a smaller practice, a deal that would make her a senior partner. Success built on the foundation I'd provided. Yet here I sat, being discarded like an outdated piece of furniture. "Of course, dear," I replied softly, playing the role of the grateful, compliant mother. "You've both done so much for me already." The administrator, a tired woman named Mrs. Henderson, wheeled me down the corridor to room 127B. The space was Spartan, a twin bed, a small dresser, and a single chair by a window that looked out onto the parking lot. My life's belongings, carefully selected by Patricia, filled exactly 2 suitcases. "Dinner is at 5, Mrs. Henderson explained, her voice kind but rushed. "Medications are distributed at 8, lights out at 10. Your children mentioned you might need some time to adjust, so we'll start you on the standard integration program." Standard integration. As if I were a refugee rather than a woman who had once owned half the commercial real estate in downtown Portland. After she left, I sat alone in the gathering twilight, listening to the sounds of institutional life, televisions murmuring behind thin walls, the shuffle of slippers on linoleum, the distant cry of someone calling for a nurse who would take too long to arrive. My phone buzzed. A text from Patricia. "Hope you're settling in well. David and I grabbed dinner at that new place downtown. The salmon was incredible. Talk soon. Love you." Love. The word felt hollow, meaningless. If this was love, I'd rather have their honest indifference. I opened my purse and pulled out the small notebook I'd been carrying for months, the one neither of my children had bothered to ask about. Inside were phone numbers, account information, and carefully written notes. The real details of my financial situation, details I'd kept hidden behind a facade of modest living and careful frugality. You see, my children thought they knew everything about my finances. They'd helped me organize my affairs, setting up what they believed was a simple pension and Social Security arrangement. They'd insisted on taking control of my day-to-day expenses, managing what they assumed was a modest nest egg that needed careful rationing to last through my remaining years. What they didn't know was that Margaret Chen had never been the helpless widow they believed her to be. The next morning brought the reality of institutional life. Breakfast at 7. Watery scrambled eggs and burnt toast served on plastic trays. Around me, residents in various states of decline pushed food around their plates with plastic utensils. The coffee was bitter, the orange juice clearly from concentrate, and the entire experience felt designed to strip away any remaining dignity. First day? Asked the woman across from me, her voice gravelly from years of cigarettes. I'm Dolores. Been here 3 years. The trick is to keep your expectations low and your sense of humor intact. I introduced myself, grateful for any human connection in this sterile environment. Dolores had been a nurse before retirement, abandoned, here by children who lived across the country and rarely called. What did you do before? She asked, stirring sugar into her coffee. Real estate, I replied simply, not mentioning the portfolio of properties I still owned through various shell companies, or the investment accounts my children knew nothing about. Ah, a businesswoman. You'll hate it here more than most, then. This place runs on routine and compliance. No room for independent thinking. The morning activities were exactly what I'd expected. Elementary crafts designed for minds that had already surrendered. I sat through a session of making friendship bracelets, surrounded by women who had once been teachers, nurses, accountants, and homemakers, all reduced to threading plastic beads on elastic string. During lunch, I excused myself and found a quiet corner near the facility's small library. From my purse, I pulled out my secure phone, not the basic model my children had given me, but a smartphone I'd purchased and kept hidden for occasions exactly like this. The first call was to Harrison, and associates my longtime financial advisors. Mrs. Chen, came the familiar voice of Robert Harrison. I was wondering when you'd contact us. Patricia called last week asking about your accounts. We provided the information for the managed retirement fund, as instructed, but nothing about the primary holdings. Good, I replied, keeping my voice low. Is everything proceeding according to the plan we discussed? Absolutely. The quarterly reports show continued growth across all portfolios. The real estate holdings are particularly strong right now. Are you ready to move to the next phase? I looked around the nursing home's common area, watching residents shuffle between activities like prisoners in a minimum security facility. My children thought they'd solved their problem, tucked me away where I couldn't interfere with their busy, important lives. Yes, I said quietly. It's time to implement the full strategy. Start with the property acquisition we discussed. Something substantial. That afternoon, I participated in bingo, playing the role of the contented grandmother, while my mind worked through financial calculations and property portfolios. When I won a $5 gift card to the facility's small store, the other residents cheered as if I'd achieved something meaningful. But that evening, after lights out, I lay in my narrow bed and opened my laptop, another possession my children didn't know about, disguised in a case that looked like a photo album. The internet connection was weak but sufficient for my needs. I pulled up real estate listings, not for modest senior housing, but for luxury properties. Mansions with sprawling grounds, chef's kitchens, and all the amenities that reflected a lifetime of success. My children thought I was browsing through old photos. Instead, I was shopping for my future. The property that caught my attention was a stunning estate just 40 minutes from the city. 12,000 square feet on 15 acres with a gourmet kitchen, wine cellar, and guest quarters that could house a full staff. The asking price was substantial, but well within my means my children couldn't even imagine. As I scrolled through the photos, I began planning not just my escape from Sunset Manor, but my return to the life I deserved. A life where dinner wasn't served on plastic trays, where my mind was respected rather than dismissed, and where my children would learn exactly who they had underestimated. The seller was motivated, the listing agent noted. Estate sale, immediate occupancy available. Perfect. I opened my encrypted email and began composing messages to my financial team, my legal advisors, and the network of professionals who had helped build my fortune while my children were busy building their own careers. It was time to remind everyone, especially Patricia and David, that Margaret Chen was far from finished. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I worked, the sound no longer oppressive, but oddly comforting. Soon, very soon, I would never have to hear that sound again. But first, I had to let my children believe their plan was working perfectly. Tomorrow, I would be the grateful mother, thankful for their wisdom in placing me somewhere safe. I would participate in activities, make friends with other residents, and give every appearance of settling into institutional life. What they wouldn't see was the empire I was rebuilding, the luxury I was arranging, and the lesson I was preparing. To teach them about the difference between caring for someone and discarding them. After all, the best revenge isn't served immediately. It's aged to perfection, like the wine I would soon be serving in my new home's cellar, to guests who understood that wisdom and success aren't diminished by age, they're refined by it. The next morning would begin my performance as the abandoned mother, but tonight was for planning my resurrection as the woman they'd forgotten I'd always been. The game, as they say, was just beginning. 3 weeks into my stay at Sunset Manor, I had perfected the art of being invisible. The staff saw what they expected: a quiet, elderly woman who participated in activities without complaint, ate her meals without fuss, and seemed to be adjusting well to institutional life. What they didn't see were the encrypted phone calls I made from the facility's small garden, or the legal documents I reviewed on my tablet during what appeared to be afternoon naps. "Mrs. Chen is settling in beautifully," I overheard Mrs. Henderson tell Patricia during one of her brief visits. "She's made friends, participates in all the programs, and hasn't complained once. You made the right choice bringing her here." Patricia beamed with self-satisfaction, her designer handbag clutched tightly as she checked her watch. She'd been there all of 15 minutes, most of which she'd spent discussing my adjustment with staff rather than actually talking to me. "That's wonderful to hear," Patricia replied, her voice carrying that professional warmth she reserved for closing deals. "I was worried she might resist the transition, but Mom's always been practical. Practical. If only she knew how practical I was being." After she left, promising to return soon with David, I made my way to the small library where I could work undisturbed. The acquisition of Whitmore Estate was proceeding faster than I'd anticipated. The sellers, a tech entrepreneur and his wife who were relocating to Singapore, were eager to close quickly. My cash offer had been accepted within hours of submission. Robert Harrison's voice crackled through my secure phone as I reviewed the final purchase documents. "The closing is scheduled for next Friday. I've arranged for the wire transfer from the Cayman account. Will you be able to attend in person?" I glanced around the empty library, calculating the logistics. "I'll need to arrange a medical appointment off-site, something that would require several hours away from the facility. I can have Dr. Westbrook schedule a consultation. He's been our family physician for years and understands the need for discretion." Dr. Westbrook. Another name from my past that my children had never bothered to learn about. They'd simply assumed I used the same basic healthcare providers they'd selected for me, never questioning why I occasionally needed to visit specialists for my conditions. The beauty of my children's neglect was that they'd never bothered to truly understand my life. They saw what they wanted to see: a widow living modestly on a pension, grateful for their occasional attention and financial management. They'd never wondered why I'd never seemed worried about money, or how I could afford the small luxuries I occasionally treated myself to. The truth was, I'd been preparing for this moment for years. When my husband Richard died 8 years ago, I'd made a decision. Instead of immediately revealing the full extent of our business empire to Patricia and David, I'd waited. I'd watched them navigate their early careers, observed their values, and tested their character. What I'd discovered had been deeply disappointing. Both. Children had inherited their father's intelligence and my determination, but somewhere along the way, they'd lost their compassion. They saw relationships as transactions, family as obligations, and elder care as a problem to be solved efficiently rather than lovingly. So I'd begun moving assets, creating shell companies, and building a financial structure that would protect my wealth while allowing me to test their true nature. The modest lifestyle they'd observed was carefully constructed theater, designed to see if they would care for me when I appeared to need them most. They'd failed spectacularly. The staff. Interviews are scheduled for next week, Robert continued. The property management company has already begun preparing the grounds, and the interior designers are waiting for your final approval on the master suite renovations. I smiled, imagining the look on Patricia's face when she discovered that her supposedly impoverished mother had purchased a 12,000-square-foot mansion while living in a nursing home. The master suite alone was larger than the entire apartment she thought I'd been living in before Sunset Manor. And the chef? I asked, pulling up the candidates' profiles on my tablet. 3 final candidates. Chef Laurent from the Meridian Hotel. Downtown, Chef Sarah Kim, who just returned from training in France, and Chef Marcus Williams, who specialized in molecular gastronomy. All have been thoroughly vetted and are available for immediate employment. I reviewed their portfolios with the same attention I'd once given to investment opportunities. After years of institutional food and frozen dinners, the prospect of meals prepared by a world-class chef felt like the ultimate luxury. Schedule interviews with all 3 for the week after closing. I want to sample their work before making a decision. Of course, the wine cellar has been stocked according to your specifications, and the house manager will be in place before you arrive. Everything will be ready for your transition. My transition. From abandoned nursing home resident to lady of the manor, all while my children remained blissfully unaware of my actual circumstances. That evening, I joined the other residents for the weekly movie night. We watched a romantic comedy from the 1990s, most of the audience dozing off before the halfway point. I sat in the back, my tablet discreetly hidden behind a throw pillow, finalizing the interior design choices for my new home. The master bedroom would feature a king-sized bed with Italian linens, a sitting area with a view of the private lake, and a walk-in closet larger than my current living space. The kitchen would be a chef's dream, professional-grade appliances, marble countertops, and enough space to prepare meals for dozens of guests, because I was planning to entertain extensively. Good movie? Asked Dolores, settling into the chair beside me as the credits rolled. Predictable, I replied, closing my tablet. But sometimes predictable is comforting. She studied my face with the sharp eyes of someone who'd spent decades reading people. You're different from the others here, Margaret. Can't quite put my finger on it, but there's something. I kept my expression neutral, though inwardly I was pleased. If I was going to maintain my cover much longer, I needed to be more careful about concealing my true nature. Different how? You watch everything. Calculate. Most folks here, they're just trying to get through each day. You're planning something. Smart woman. I'd have to be more careful around her. Just trying to make the best of my situation, I said, with a gentle smile. My children think this is best for me, so I'm learning to accept it. But Dolores wasn't fooled. Acceptance and planning aren't the same thing. I've seen both in my time here. You're planning. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from David. Hope you're doing well, Mom. Patricia says you're adjusting great. Work is crazy busy, but I'll try to visit next month. Take care. Next month. As if I were a subscription service. He could check on when convenient. I showed Dolores the message, watching her expression shift from curiosity to disgust. That's it? 3 weeks in a text message? They're very busy, I said, though the excuse felt hollow even to me. Important careers, you know. I know abandonment when I see it, Dolores replied sharply. My kids live 3,000 miles away and call twice a week. Distance isn't an excuse for neglect. That night, I lay in my narrow bed and listened to the familiar sounds of the facility. Someone's television too loud, the squeak of a nurse's shoes in the hallway, the distant hum of medical equipment. In just over a week, I would never hear these sounds again. Instead, I would wake up in a bedroom with 18-foot ceilings, surrounded by custom furnishings and original artwork. My days would begin with coffee prepared by a professional chef, served in bone china on a terrace overlooking manicured gardens. My evenings would be spent in a library filled with first edition books, or perhaps in the wine cellar sampling vintages that cost more than most people's monthly salary. But the real luxury wouldn't be the mansion or the staff or even the freedom to live as I chose. The real luxury would be watching my children discover that their supposedly helpless mother had outmaneuvered them completely. The closing was scheduled for Friday at 2 p.m. Dr. Westbrook had arranged for a specialist consultation that would require most of the afternoon. The nursing home staff were sympathetic and understanding, offering to arrange transportation to and from my appointment. Such a devoted daughter, Mrs. Henderson had commented when Patricia called to confirm the arrangement. Making sure you get the best medical care even while you're here. If only she knew that the medical care was actually a real estate closing that would make me the owner of one of the most prestigious properties in the state. Friday morning arrived with unusual clarity. I dressed carefully in my most conservative outfit, a navy blue cardigan and sensible flats that suggested frailty rather than the financial power I was about to wield. The taxi arrived promptly at 1:30, and I settled into the back seat with my small purse and the manila folder containing documents the driver assumed were medical records. The law office of Hartley, Brigham & Associates occupied the top floor of downtown's most prestigious building. As the elevator climbed past floors housing investment banks and corporate headquarters, I felt a familiar surge of excitement. This was my world, the world of high-stakes transactions and serious money. Robert Harrison was waiting in the reception area, his silver hair and tailored suit a sharp contrast to the casual clothes I'd grown accustomed to at Sunset Manor. "Margaret," he said, rising to greet me. "You look well. Ready for this?" "More than ready," I replied, straightening my shoulders. "Let's make history." The closing took exactly 47 minutes. Papers were signed, funds were transferred, and keys were exchanged with the efficiency of a well-orchestrated ballet. The sellers, a young couple eager to start their Singapore adventure, were gracious and professional. They had no idea they were selling to a woman who was supposed to be warehoused in a nursing home, forgotten by her children and surviving on a modest pension. "Congratulations, Mrs. Chen," said the closing attorney as we shook hands. "Whitmore Estate is officially yours. Mine. 12,000 square feet of luxury, 15 acres of pristine landscape, and enough space to host the social events I was already planning. Events that would reintroduce Margaret Chen to a world that had forgotten her capabilities." As I rode back to Sunset Manor in the same taxi, I reviewed the house keys in my palm. Monday, I would begin the process of moving my belongings, the real belongings, not the carefully curated collection my children had packed. Tuesday, I would meet with the interior design team to finalize the master suite. Wednesday, I would interview chefs, and Thursday, I would begin planning the dinner party that would change everything. The taxi pulled up to Sunset Manor's entrance at exactly 5:15 p.m., just as the dinner service was beginning. I walked through the front doors with the same careful, measured steps I'd used for weeks, greeting staff with the same gentle smile that had made me nearly invisible. "How was your appointment, Mrs. Chen?" asked the receptionist. "Very thorough," I replied truthfully. The doctor was quite optimistic about my condition. Indeed, my condition had never been better. In just a few weeks, I would be living in a mansion that would make Patricia's suburban palace look like a starter home. I would be dining on cuisine prepared by a world-class chef while my children grabbed takeout between their important meetings. Most importantly, I would be in position to teach them a lesson about family, loyalty, and the dangerous assumption that age equals helplessness. As I walked to the dining room for another meal of institutional food, I was already planning the menu for my first dinner party. The guests would be carefully chosen: business associates, community leaders, and perhaps a few reporters who would be very interested in the story of Margaret Chen's remarkable transformation. After all, everyone loves a good comeback story. especially one that involves a mansion, a private chef, and the complete humiliation of ungrateful children who thought they could dispose of their mother like an unwanted piece of furniture. The real show was about to begin. The chef interviews. We're scheduled for Thursday afternoon, another medical appointment that would require me to be away from Sunset Manor for several hours. This time, I'd arranged for a car service rather than a taxi, something more befitting the mistress of Whitmore Estate, though the driver had been instructed to pick me up 2 blocks away from the nursing home. I stood at the corner of Maple and 3rd, watching the black sedan approach. For the first time in months, I wasn't wearing the carefully selected elderly resident wardrobe. Instead, I'd chosen a charcoal gray suit that I'd had delivered to a post office box, along with Italian leather shoes and the pearl earrings that had been my mother's. The transformation was remarkable. I looked like the successful businesswoman I'd always been, not the discarded mother my children saw. The drive to Whitmore Estate took 35 minutes through increasingly exclusive neighborhoods. As we turned through the iron gates bearing my new address, I felt a surge of satisfaction that had nothing to do with the property's grandeur and everything to do with the strategic position I was creating. The house manager, Elena Rodriguez, was waiting at the front entrance. I'd hired her based on Robert Harrison's recommendation. She'd previously managed households for tech executives and oil company presidents. Her resume was impeccable, her references glowing, and most importantly, she understood the need for absolute discretion. "Mrs. Chen," she said, stepping forward with professional warmth. "Welcome home." Home. The word carried weight I hadn't expected. This wasn't just a property acquisition or a strategic move. This was the life I was reclaiming, the future I was building while my children assumed I was learning to play bingo. Elena led me through the grand foyer, pointing out details I'd only seen in photographs. The marble staircase curved elegantly to the 2nd floor, where my master suite awaited final approval. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across antique furnishings that had been carefully selected to reflect old, money sophistication rather than nouveau riche ostentation. "The kitchen has been prepared for the chef interviews," Elena explained as we walked through rooms that could have housed entire families. All 3 candidates have been provided with identical ingredients and asked to prepare a signature dish, plus something that would appeal to discerning mature palates. I smiled at her diplomatic phrasing. She knew my age, of course, but she also knew better than to make assumptions about my capabilities or preferences. The kitchen was a masterpiece of professional design. 6-burner gas range, double ovens, 2 dishwashers, and enough counter space to prepare a banquet. Through the large windows, I could see the formal dining room where I would soon be entertaining guests who had no idea they were about to witness the resurrection of Margaret Chen. "The wine cellar?" I asked. "Fully stocked according to your specifications. The sommelier you hired has ensured an excellent selection ranging from everyday drinking wines to special occasion vintages." The first candidate, Chef Laurent, arrived promptly at 2 p.m. He was exactly what I'd expected from his resume: classically trained, professionally confident, and slightly intimidated by the grandeur of his surroundings. His signature dish was a perfect duck confit with cherry gastrique, technically flawless but lacking imagination. "I understand you'll be entertaining frequently," he said as I sampled his work. "I specialize in traditional French cuisine, the kind that impresses business. Associates and social peers? Traditional, safe, boring." This was the kind of chef Patricia would hire, someone who followed recipes rather than creating experiences. Chef Sarah Kim arrived 30 minutes later, her knife case slung over her shoulder with casual confidence. Her approach was immediately different. She examined the kitchen like an artist surveying a blank canvas, testing the stove's heat response and checking the quality of the knives. Her signature dish was Korean-French fusion, braised short ribs, with gochujang reduction and truffle oil, accompanied by kimchi made from vegetables grown in her own garden. The flavors were bold, unexpected, and absolutely perfect. Cooking isn't just about nutrition, she explained as I savored each bite. It's about storytelling. Every meal should tell the story of the person it's prepared for. And what story would you tell about me? I asked. She studied my face with the same intensity she'd brought to examining the kitchen. Someone who has been underestimated. Someone ready to surprise people. The kind of person who appreciates bold flavors because they've lived a bold life. Smart. Very smart. Chef Marcus Williams arrived last, carrying molecular gastronomy equipment that looked more suited to a laboratory than a kitchen. His presentation was technically impressive. Spherified olives that burst with flavor, foam that tasted like concentrated mushroom essence, and meat cooked to precise temperatures using sous vide techniques. "This is the future of fine dining," he announced, clearly proud of his theatrical creations. Food as performance art. The food was interesting, certainly, but it felt like he was cooking for Instagram rather than for the pleasure of eating. This was about his ego, not his guests' experience. After all three had departed, Elena and I sat in the formal dining room reviewing their presentations. "Chef Kim," I said without hesitation. "She understands that cooking is about connection, not just technique." "I agree. Shall I call her with an offer?" "Yes. Full-time position, housing in the guest quarters if she wants it, and complete creative freedom in menu planning. I want her to feel invested in this household's success." As Elena made the call, I walked through my new home, really seeing it for the first time as mine, rather than as a strategic acquisition. The library would be perfect for morning coffee and evening wine. The sitting room had ideal acoustics for the string quartet I was planning to hire for my first dinner party. The master suite, when complete, would be a sanctuary worthy of the woman who had built an empire while her children weren't paying attention. My secure phone buzzed with a message from Robert Harrison. "David called the office today asking about your healthcare expenses. Seems concerned about the frequency of your medical appointments." Interesting. David was beginning to pay attention, not out of concern for my well-being, but out of worry about the cost of my care. His message to Robert had been purely financial. Were my healthcare expenses cutting into the modest inheritance he expected to receive? I typed back, "Let him worry. Send him the bills for the fake appointments but nothing about actual expenses." The fake medical bills were a masterpiece of creative accounting. Dr. Westbrook had been billing my managed account for consultations, tests, and treatments that existed only on paper. To David's accountant mind, it would look like his mother was developing expensive health problems that were draining her limited resources. Perfect. That evening, I returned to Sunset Manor with the same careful steps and gentle demeanor that had made me invisible for weeks. But everything felt different. Now, the institutional hallways seemed smaller, the fluorescent lighting more oppressive, and the smell of industrial cleaning products almost unbearable after breathing the fresh air of my estate. "How was your appointment, dear?" asked Dolores as I joined her for the evening news. "Hopeful," I replied truthfully. "The doctor thinks my condition is improving." She studied my face with those sharp eyes. "You look different. Brighter somehow." I needed to be more careful. Dolores was too observant, and I couldn't afford to blow my cover when I was so close to the reveal. "I'm feeling more optimistic about the future," I said, which was certainly true. The next morning brought a phone call from Patricia. Actual voice contact rather than her usual texts. This was unusual enough to put me on alert. "Mom, David mentioned you've been having a lot of medical appointments lately. I hope everything's okay?" "Just routine monitoring," I replied, injecting a slight tremor into my voice. "You know how doctors are. They want to check everything when you reach my age." "Well, that's good that you're being proactive. Are the costs manageable?" There. It was. Not concern for my health, but worry about the expense. I could practically hear her calculating how much these appointments might be cutting into her future inheritance. "The insurance covers most of it," I lied smoothly, though there have been some additional tests that required copays. How much in copays? Her lawyer instincts were kicking in, probing for specific information. Oh, I don't want to burden you with the details, dear. I'm managing fine. The more I deflected, the more worried she became. Not about me, but about the money. This conversation would undoubtedly lead to discussions with David about my healthcare costs, possibly even attempts to intervene in my medical care to protect their financial interests, exactly as I'd planned. After hanging up, I made my way to the facility's small garden where I could speak privately with Chef Kim. She'd accepted the position and wanted to discuss menu planning for what she'd been told was a welcome-home dinner party for a small group of friends. I'm thinking about themes? Her voice was bright with enthusiasm through the phone. Since you're transitioning back to independent living after your recovery, perhaps something that celebrates new beginnings. Fresh spring vegetables, light proteins, wines that suggest optimism and renewal. Recovery. Elena had briefed her well. The story was that I was recovering from a minor health scare that had required temporary assisted living, but was now ready to return to my own home. It explained my current location without raising questions about family dynamics. That sounds perfect, I agreed. How many guests should we plan for? You mentioned 12 for the first dinner. Intimate enough for real conversation, large enough to make a statement. 12 carefully chosen guests who would help reintroduce Margaret Chen to Portland's social and business community. The guest list was already planned. Business associates, who remembered my real estate empire, community leaders who valued discretion and influence, and one or two carefully selected media contacts who would appreciate an exclusive story about comeback and resilience. The dining room can accommodate twice that number if needed, Chef Kim continued. Are you planning to entertain regularly? Very regularly, I confirmed. This is just the beginning. That afternoon brought another medical appointment, this time to meet with Elena and finalize the household staff. In addition to Chef Kim, I was hiring a groundskeeper, a housekeeper, and a part-time social coordinator who specialized in high-end events. Each hire was carefully vetted not just for their professional qualifications, but for their discretion. They were being told that I was a widow returning to active social life after a period of health-related seclusion. My family would be described as supportive but busy with their own careers, distant enough to explain their absence without suggesting abandonment. The social coordinator, James Fletcher, had previously worked for museum boards and charity organizations. His client list read like a who's who of Portland society, and his understanding of social dynamics was exactly what I needed. The key to a successful reintroduction, he explained as we toured the entertainment spaces, is to make it seem effortless. Your guests should leave feeling like they've discovered something wonderful, not like they've attended a performance. And the media presence? Subtle. Catherine Walsh from Portland Monthly will be there as a guest, not as a reporter. She's discreet and has an eye for interesting stories. If she decides to write about the evening, it will be because she was genuinely impressed, not because she was asked to provide coverage. Everything was falling into place with the precision of a well-orchestrated business plan. The house, the staff, the social strategy, all designed to reveal Margaret Chen as the formidable woman she'd always been, while simultaneously exposing Patricia and David's abandonment of their mother. But the most important element was still being planned. The guest list that would ensure my children learned about my transformation in the most public, most humiliating way possible. The dinner. Party was scheduled for 3 weeks away, just enough time for final preparations and for my children to become even more comfortable with their assumption that I was safely warehoused and forgotten. They had no idea that their discarded mother was about to become the talk of the town, or that their names would soon be whispered in scandalized tones throughout Portland's social circles. After all, society loves nothing more than a story about ungrateful children who abandoned their successful mother, especially when that mother proves to be far more resourceful than anyone imagined. The transformation was nearly complete. Soon, it would be time for the revelation. The morning of the dinner party, I checked out of Sunset Manor with a single suitcase, claiming a family emergency required my immediate departure. Mrs. Henderson was sympathetic, promising to hold my room for a few days in case I needed to return. I would never return. By 6 p.m., I stood in the foyer of Whitmore Estate wearing a stunning midnight blue gown, greeting 12 carefully selected guests. The table was set with crystal and silver, the wine cellar's finest bottles breathing in preparation. Chef Kim had outdone herself. Each course was a masterpiece that told the story of transformation and triumph. Catherine Walsh from Portland Monthly was deep in conversation with Senator Morrison about urban development when my secure phone buzzed. Patricia's text, "Mom, the nursing home called. Where are you? We're worried sick." Perfect timing. I excused myself and called Patricia, putting the phone on speaker for my guests to hear. "Patricia, darling," I said, my voice carrying through the dining room. "I'm so sorry I didn't call earlier. I've been busy with my dinner. Party." "Dinner party? Mom, what are you talking about? You're supposed to be at Sunset Manor. They said you left for an emergency." The emergency was my realization that I deserved better than institutional food and condescending children. I interrupted smoothly. "I'm at my new home, Whitmore Estate. Perhaps you've heard of it?" Silence. Then, "That's impossible. You don't have that kind of money." "Actually, I do. 12,000 square feet, 15 acres, and a wine cellar that cost more than your annual salary. I built quite an empire while you were busy building your careers." The guests were listening intently, some beginning to understand they were witnessing something extraordinary. "You tricked us!" David's voice joined the call. Patricia had obviously grabbed him. "No, darling. I tested you. And you failed spectacularly. You abandoned your mother in a nursing home while she owned more real estate than both of you combined." I could hear them arguing in the background, panic setting in as they realized the magnitude of their mistake. "Catherine," I said, addressing the reporter directly, "you mentioned wanting to write about resilience and second chances. I think I have quite a story for you." Catherine's eyes sparkled with professional interest. This was bigger than a dinner party. This was a scandal that would rock Portland's social scene. "The woman you see before you," I continued, "spent 3 weeks in a nursing home, placed there by children who assumed she was helpless and poor. Tonight, she's hosting dinner in her mansion, served by her private chef, surrounded by friends, who value her for who she is, not what they can take from her." The applause that followed was genuine and thunderous. My phone was buzzing with increasingly frantic calls from Patricia and David, but I'd already said everything that needed saying. The story would be in next month's Portland Monthly. The social media photos were already being shared, and by morning, everyone would know that Margaret Chen had played the long game and won. As Chef Kim served the final course, a decadent chocolate soufflé that seemed to defy gravity, I raised my glass to my guests. "To new beginnings," I toasted, "and to the wisdom that comes with age. Sometimes the most powerful move is to let people underestimate you, then prove them spectacularly wrong." The crystal glasses chimed in perfect harmony, a sound far more beautiful than any institutional bell I'd ever heard. Outside, through the dining room windows, I could see David's car pulling up the circular drive. Too late, of course. The damage was done, the story told, the lesson learned. Margaret Chen was back, and she was magnificent. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.